great. All right, so hi everyone. Welcome to the Ecology Center Live. We're going to talk about using community-led science to find PFAS in fish, water, and more. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Ronza Potter. I am the Development Director at the Ecology Center, and I will be your moderator for today's event. This program is scheduled to last until 6:30, so we're going to be hearing a presentation, and then we'll have time for questions after. Currently, all attendees are in listen-only mode. If at any time during the webinar you have a question, please use the Q&A box to share it. If you can look at the screen on your right hand, you can see in the bottom the Q&A box. After the presentation, we'll have time for questions. So please note today's webinar is being recorded and materials from today's presentation will be available tomorrow. I want to thank Avalon International Breads in Ann Arbor for offering coupons for our attendees to support our event. I hope you grabbed your coffee. Avalon doesn't use any packaging that contains PFAS, so it's really amazing that they do that. And now I want to introduce our presenters for today's event. Jeff Gerhardt, he's the Research Director at the Ecology Center. He has worked for over 20 years on a wide range of environmental issues, including air quality, pollution prevention, life cycle assessment, consumer product testing, and green chemistry. For over 16 years, he has worked with the Ecology Center, and Jeff helped develop the now internationally recognized healthystuff.org product chemistry disclosure project and its extensive website of many advocacy resources and product testing results for more than 100,000 products. And we have also Erica Bloom. She's going to be presenter today too. She's the Toxic Campaign Director at the Ecology Center. Erica has worked in Michigan's environmental and food systems movement since 2010. She has experience in program development, policy, coalition building, and grant writing. At the Ecology Center, she focuses on leading the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network and supporting projects through the organization's Healthy Stuff Lab. And also we have Bill Eisenman. Am I pronouncing your last name right? We've been trying to guess your last name. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bill. Bill is an amazing angler who volunteers his time with Friends of the Rouge. He helped us collect fish from the Huron and Rouge rivers. Pretty much the results that we're gonna present today. Bill played a big role in this project. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to our presenters. Just want to remind you one more time to post any questions that you have in the Q&A box, and at the end of the presentation, we're gonna answer your questions. All right, you can guys start.
Okay, thank you, Ronza, and thank you, Bill, for joining us today, and everybody that's on the call. I'm going to start us off and then talk a bit about our fish project, and then Bill is going to talk a little bit from his perspective, how he participated in the project, and then Jeff is going to talk a bit about some of our other community-led projects that have to do with PFAS and other chemical monitoring. And then we'll do questions. So we'll have a few different speakers, and I hope this is kind of a new, kind of interesting topic for you all. And we're definitely open to questions at the end. So yes, the Ecology Center Live, using community-led science to find PFAS in fish, water, and more. So first of all, why community-led science? I think that's a big thing that we want to make sure this presentation really frames and focuses on. So there's a lot of science that the Healthy Stuff Lab does that happens in communities, but what was really important about this project was being in community, partnering with and in relationship with community. And the reason for that is because lots of different types of science or research can go into a community and not really value the expertise of community members or people who are closest to the pollution or contamination. This project really wanted to flip that, right? And say, we need to shift power from us as just traditional researchers to what's happening in community, and know that the community members themselves are the ones who can, help design the project, that they themselves are powerful data collectors. They have expertise to give to what are the species of fish, that we are going to test? Where should we go collect fish? Who are the people in the community we need to talk to? And so the framing of this fish project was really around partnering with impacted communities rather than using folks as research subjects. And Bill is, one of our volunteer anglers and was a great partner. We had a few others that I'm going to mention as well. So how did we do this specifically? It's really good in theory to do this, but how did we actually on the ground do this project using community-led science? First of all, we listened to community needs and their assets. We partnered with the Huron River Watershed Council and the Rouge River to think about, okay, what do they know of their community in terms of who's fishing where? Do they know anglers that can participate? What are some of the questions that these anglers may have? And even before we started collecting fish, we did recruitment and found anglers like Bill and others to invite them to think about, where are we going to collect these fish, and what kind of questions do they have about PFAS showing up in fish? We also provided a training to make sure that when the anglers and community members went out to collect, they felt confident in what they were doing. So we did that last April now, and everyone came together, and it was a really good way to do the training, but also to network and to meet each other and build those strong relationships. And then we also continued that through making sure we had connection throughout the project. So we had a Facebook group, we had emails, people were sharing photos. It was a good way to build like a cohort of community members through the project. There were opportunities throughout to participate in different phases. So in addition to collecting the fish, we had another angler that was helping us actually do the dissection and the filleting. And then we talked a lot about how do we want to do education and outreach with the community, with the anglers. And then finally, spokespeople. The anglers and the watershed councils participated in interviews in this webinar. There's more interviews coming out with some of the anglers. And so it was really important to the project that the results and the process didn't just come from us, right, as researchers, but that the anglers themselves were able to share why they cared about this, why it matters, and connect maybe with other anglers too. So I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about the fish study. Like I mentioned, it was a partnership with Huron River Watershed Council and Friends of the Rouge. So why did we do this? Well, as many of you probably know, there's some do not eat the fish advisories in Michigan. Unfortunately, PFAS is ubiquitous and has been discharged into our rivers and watersheds. And the Ecology Center being in Southeast Michigan, we really focused on the watersheds that are closest to our home, the Huron River and the Rouge River. In the Huron River, there's a do not eat the fish advisory. All fish from up in Wixom Road to I-275, there's still an advisory because of a chrome plating facility that had discharged PFAS. In the Rouge River, there's PFAS. While we were doing the project, there was actually a do not eat the fish advisory that came out for bluegill and sunfish caught on the lower branch and some of the main branch. And then even more recently, rainbow smelt and carp, as of this January, in Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, and several inland lakes now have do not eat the fish advisories. So this is really unacceptable. People in the Great Lakes in Michigan, fishing is a tradition, and it's really hard to watch this tradition be, have fish advisories and being told you can't eat certain things. And so we really wanted to tackle this in community and figure out what the Ecology Center can do. So our research was a little bit different than other research that has happened. The state of Michigan has tested fish and monitored. We really wanted to understand the broader ecological impact of PFAS. So we analyzed whole fish for 40 different PFAS chemicals. This is a little different than what the state does. They analyze the fillet of the fish because that's what most anglers are actually consuming. So that's important. And they issue do not eat the fish advisories or fish consumption advisories based on just one type of PFAS chemical called PFOS. And while that's very ubiquitous, it's a commonly found PFAS chemical, we wanted to see a broader set of chemicals and see where those are showing up. We also wanted to understand which locations and species in the watersheds may have higher PFAS levels. And that was really key to partnering with anglers to understand, okay, what might have been an undersampled area, and where can we kind of get in that we might have connections there. This is a photo of some of the anglers when we did our training back in April. A really great group that we appreciate participating. A little bit more of some photos. We had 6 local anglers. Again, they advised us on the study questions, the training. They suggested spots to collect the fish and helped us throughout the process. And very importantly, they were financially compensated. While I think they all kind of volunteered their time and wanted to participate, we made sure that we had a grant to do this work, and that part of that grant fund went directly to community members. That's a big part of community-led research, and making sure that people feel like their time and energy and expertise is valued. And here's a few more photos of Irma and Jared. Irma says, I'm an angler, and she has a relationship with other anglers, and there's a real independence in being able to get your own food. And Jared says, one of my favorite parts about fishing is sharing what I've caught, but he's worried now with fish consumption advisories, and he's not sure, if he should continue eating that fish with his family. So where did we go? Where did we catch the fish? This is a diagram of the Rouge River watershed. For those of you who haven't seen it all in one, this is what it looks like. The Detroit River is down here where my mouse is. It goes all the way up to kind of the Northville area up here. Livonia is over here. It's a big watershed. And so we wanted to do the upper branches and also some of the lower, closer to Detroit. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the data, but you can see just in this diagram what the total PFAS levels were in the whole fish. And this is parts per billion. So some of the higher levels were found in Valley Woods Preserve, Johnson Creek, and Bellinger Park too. It was definitely a range. Same thing in the Huron River watershed. We wanted to kind of do a broad scope of the Huron. We went up to Hubble Pond near Milford, Kent Lake, which is in Kensington, Portage Lake, and all the way down to this is the Ann Arbor area, Gallup Park, Ford Lake. You'll see, and then in the next couple slides too, we talk a little bit more about these really high levels. Some of the highest levels were found in Kent Lake and Ford Lake. Again, this is the whole fish, not just the fillet, but it includes, all the entire fish. So here's a little snapshot of what we did once we caught the fish. The anglers caught over 100 fish, and we processed about 60 of those, and we sent them to 3 different labs to be tested. We homogenized them and we freeze dried them. So this is a photo for those of you who aren't getting too squeamish of us dissecting the fish and then weighing it. We had some wonderful intern help, and really it was just a team effort throughout last summer, processing and getting it ready to get sent to the lab. So it's quite labor intensive. So what did we find? For those of you who have looked at our report, maybe all of the fish had PFAS. Every single one that we tested contained some level of PFAS in both watersheds. We found 14 different types of PFAS chemicals, and each fish that we tested had at least one of those PFAS chemicals. And as you recall, I was talking about PFOS, which is commonly tested and used as advisory levels. PFOS were found in every fish that was tested. PFOS has actually been phased out and out of manufacturing. However, because these are forever chemicals, they don't really go away, and it takes a long time for them to go away. We're still finding PFOS in the fish in the watersheds. Here's a snapshot going back to some of the data that I was pointing to earlier. This is specifically in the Huron River watershed. Again, you can see those higher levels of whole fish in Kent Lake, in the bluegill, smallmouth bass in Ford Lake, and then kind of getting down to Hubble Pond and again in Ford Lake. I live right by Ford Lake, and I see people fishing there often. So we know that there's advisories out there, and we know that people are still fishing, eating the fish. So it's really important that we continue to do these kinds of studies and also couple it with, outreach and the education as much as we can. So what are we recommending? It's tricky because we know, right, in Michigan that fishing it's a tradition and that people love to fish and it's important nutrition for a lot of folks. So as of now, we're not recommending people completely stop. But what we are saying is if there's a do not eat the fish advisory, you really should follow the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services guidance and do take their guidance. So if there is a do not eat the fish advisory, use that information to make a choice for yourself. And then if possible, try to find other alternative rivers or lakes or other sources of protein. If you can't eat the fish in your local watershed. And then if you are eating the fish and there's PFAS, what are some other ways that you can limit your exposure, commonly found in consumer products? So this is a photo of one of our anglers, Jared, who had that great quote about really trying to decide, if he's going to keep eating the fish, and it's become something, his family has enjoyed for a long time. So it's a tough decision, right, for anglers and for people in our watersheds, just to know that there's contamination and to make decisions on if they're going to continue to eat the fish or not. So some of our policy and regulatory recommendations, really what we most want to see is prevention. We want to make sure that that PFAS are getting out of many of our product sectors and as a class. PFAS are a class of thousands of chemicals. It's not just one or two regulations. We really want to see PFAS regulated as a class. And we want to see that happen in places like plating facilities, consumer products. We also are concerned about the level of the fish consumption advisories. They're at for a do not eat the fish consumption advisory, the levels have to be 300 parts per billion. We know that the EPA has recently issued drinking water safe levels at essentially almost nothing. And so we think that the pace of, we know drinking water and eating fish are different, but we think that the fish consumption advisory really should keep pace with some of the work and new science that's happening at the federal level around drinking water. We also think that there should be science-based standards for how much their contaminant level should be in fish and wildlife. We have drinking water standards, groundwater standards in Michigan, but not for fish. And then, of course, just increasing signage to making sure that outreach education of anglers is really important, and that always can be improved. Okay, so before I keep going, I think what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen so that we can hear from Bill. Does that make sense, Ronza, Laura?
Sure.
Okay, I'm just going to do it. Okay, so I'm going to let Bill talk a little bit about the project, about why he participated, and just hear from his perspective as an angler.
All right, well, thank you for the opportunity. And it was a very interesting and a very rewarding experience to participate in this activity. So many of my earliest memories from my childhood are of fishing, and I've continued to do that throughout my life, such that it's really part of my, personal makeup. But as you go along through the process of harvesting natural resources, fairly quickly it becomes obvious to you that you need to participate in making sure that that's sustainable as well. That led me along the way to a lot of activity from a volunteer standpoint, especially in recent times with Friends of the Rouge, and in various monitoring programs there, looking at benthic macroinvertebrates, fish, and even working from a mussel standpoint at looking at what populations were and what the effect of different changes in the watersheds we're having on them. That was my connection back to this project that made this opportunity available to me. And because of the, I think there's a level of knowledge that's being surfaced through a variety of media and a variety of information sources that have highlighted that PFAS is a critical issue in our watersheds. Being able to help identify data in a way that represents the way that, not as a volunteer monitoring individual, but as someone who's actually collecting fish for consumption, seemed like a really, really great approach and a good way to get at data that really impacts the people in the community. So in taking this on, one of the key elements is to, act like you're just an average angler who's out collecting dinner. And on top of that, the Ecology Center and the rest of the team worked very hard at making the cleanliness and security, data security side of that very easy and manageable, as well as the documentation, so that we could, have samples that weren't contaminated and that we had good documentation on where they were from, when they were from, and how they were collected. It was very interesting in going through the collecting process that at several of the locations, there were either others who were fishing, who, were very likely to take some of their harvest home for dinner. And in one specific case, in the Valley Woods Preserve sample, I was literally collecting side by side with a guy who was harvesting his dinner. And he took a bag of creek chubs from the stream at that point and was going to walk over the hill to his apartment and cook them for dinner. And so, having the ability to know fish that were swimming side by side with the ones that he was going to eat for dinner, it really brings home the point that this is a critical issue to have this kind of information. I'm really astounded with the results that we got and how prevalent these chemicals are, and how important it is for us to carry this message to the community and be able to make an impact in the way that we respond to this issue. So, Erica, is there anything else that I can add for you? Any questions on your mind that others might be interested in?
No, I think that was really great, Bill. I bet there will be some questions at the end if you can.
Sure.
Stick around, and then we can make sure that you.
Yep, absolutely.
So, okay, thank you, Bill. It's really great to have you. So I'm gonna switch over to Jeff, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of our other community-led projects. You want me to share my screen, Jeff, or you want to do yours?
Go ahead and do yours.
Oh.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. The other thing I want to add, just for context for the community-based work we do, is we also do a lot of work with academic collaborators, and we work to try to push the science on the issues that we work on. So whether it's air, water, soil, we do have oftentimes academic collaborators. So with the water work or the air work we're doing, we work a lot with the University of Michigan and Wayne State. Important partner on the fish project. We're doing a whole separate set of analysis on these samples, looking at some of the different organs in the fish that we hope to publish as a peer review study. So there's both the community part of the work, but also we're trying to do important and good science and try to push our understanding of the impacts of PFAS in these different environments. So I'm going to talk a little more about a few of the other bits of work that we do. So go ahead, Erica, if you want to advance. One of the things that we heard a lot from residents, community organizations is concern about PFAS in the air. We've been hearing this for a couple of years now, and our approach is doing some preliminary work looking at what's called deposition sampling. You may have seen some articles. This is an article from last year talking about that we have this global cycling of PFAS in a way where the amount of PFAS that's in the atmosphere is causing it to show up in rain and in the air pretty ubiquitously around the world. So one of our approaches was to look at what could be a community-led sampling method that would allow us to look at that. So we've been talking with Dr. Faust at Worcester College. This is on the right-hand side here is their study they did in Indiana and Ohio, where they used simple deposition sampling by collecting rain in buckets to help look at the types of PFAS that were falling in different areas across this Indiana and Ohio, and use that to try to draw some insights into what the sources of PFAS might be. So I'll show you some of the work we've started to do on it. Go ahead, Erica, next slide. So again, this is designed to be very low cost, community-driven sampling. So we utilize a simple 5-gallon Lowe's bucket. This is on the left-hand side. This is a sampler in Southwest Detroit where we collected a rain event. This is Teresa in the middle, taking the sample from that and putting it into a low-cost PFAS sampling device called a Cyclopure, which is a filter-based method for analyzing PFAS in liquid samples. And here's Erica and our colleagues up in Flint, getting set up to do the sampling in Flint. This work is kind of in a preliminary stage. We did some sampling at the end of last year. We're looking at doing more sampling in the summer. And the hope is that by doing sufficient amount of sampling, we can maybe start to identify sources of PFAS that were previously not known that were contributing to PFAS in the air. Next slide. This is the Cyclopure sampler. This is a product made by Eurofins, and they Cyclopure, sorry. And they this is a sampler that's less than $100 that you can use to sample your home water. If folks are interested in these, they can reach out to Eric and I, but we're using them to sample surface water, rainwater, as well as drinking water. Next slide. We've also had a lot of concern about PFAS and surface water foam. If you're not familiar with what we're referring to here, here's some images. The image on the left is Barton Dam in Ann Arbor. That's me out there with my sampling wand. And these are some other images from surface water foam on the Huron River right near Ann Arbor. And that's a sample that we collected from the river. There's concern, particularly in impacted areas around the state by residents about this. Concern around the Great Lakes, particularly Lake Huron, about PFAS showing up in surface water foam. And the reason is PFAS tends to partition into the very near surface layer of a body of water. And as it's there, when the body of water is agitated, this foam can form, and the PFAS concentrates in that foam at up to 1,000 times higher concentration than what's in the water. So next slide, I'll show you some data this is work that our state of Michigan did. And I know the numbers are small. They're not that important. They're important, but don't worry, try to read them. The blue lines here are the surface water foam. The reddish lines, I'm a little colorblind, are the surface water results. And again, this is on a log scale, which is a little complicated just to get the graph to fit there. So For instance, this is a sample done on the Huron River in the green circle here. And the level in the water on the river was 251 parts per trillion. When the foam was sampled by a state contractor, it was 143,000 parts per trillion. So you can see how that concentration into the foam occurs. We did sampling last year in the fall, and Argo Pond just downriver from the dam there. And again, the typical levels of PFAS we're seeing in the river right now in Argo Pond are around 20 to 35 parts per trillion. It varies a little bit. But again, we saw that magnification of PFAS into the foam, over 9,000 parts per trillion in the foam. We've been working to try to get more awareness of this and more warning signs to caution people for interacting with the foam, because it's definitely something that's happening. Next slide. We're also supporting community groups around the state that have raised particular concerns about PFAS in their communities. We partnered with community members and the Sierra Club to work with folks in Holly, Michigan, to test soil, drinking water, and surface water in an area that's in the vicinity of significant landfill there. The land has been subject to flooding from water that is connected to the landfill. So this is just a picture of some of the community folks and one of the Sierra Club volunteers out doing that sampling. Again, this work is in progress. We don't have a report on it, but as an example of some of the work we're doing. Next slide. The other work that I'm very involved in is community-based air monitoring and policy work, primarily in Detroit and Wayne County. If you don't know, we have both an office in Ann Arbor and in Detroit with a couple staff that live in Detroit. So we have a lot of active work we're doing in Southeast Michigan there. These are a couple of the monitors that we've been implementing to build out a monitoring network, a comprehensive air monitoring network in the county. The one on the right here has meteorological attachment here, so we can do wind speed, direction. These are clarity monitors. They're solar powered monitors that monitor multiple pollutants. Next slide. One of our big focuses is really building community capacity in the Detroit-based organizations to support these monitoring projects. So this is these are pictures just from this week. Actually, we're working with Green Door Initiative, which is a Detroit-based environmental justice organization that also does job training for young people. And as part of that program, we're both supporting them to build capacity to analyze data and to visualize data and communicate that. But also, this is a team of folks that we've been training to go out and install monitors, service monitors, work with the data on them. And so this is that's Justin on the ladder there installing a monitor just yesterday. And so we're really excited about this project. It's been really great to build capacity in the community to actually do this work. So next slide. The other thing we're doing is a collaborative planning process in Detroit. And this is a report we just issued last week. I believe it's going to be available on our website. So from air pollution to solutions, it was a collaborative planning process with a group of organizations throughout the city, in which we engaged the community, the organizations, to define what the pathway forward in terms of getting healthier air in Detroit, and what kinds of policies, both local, state, and national, need to be implemented to do that. We just completed this project. We're moving into the implementation phase of the project, which is going to involve both continued work to do air monitoring around locations of concern in the community, as well as promote new state policies that we think will address some of the desperate impacts that are happening in the city. Next slide. As part of that project, we had community conversations about air quality in the fall of last year. We had 3 of them with over 100 community members participated in it. We produced a summary document on that outlined the priorities that were identified. I really wanted to include this so you can see some of the organizations that we worked with there. There were other organizations involved, but these were some of the lead organizations that we worked with on the air quality work. And again, these documents are available, and I think they're really interesting in terms of the community perspective and the community driving the priorities for the project that we're doing there. Next slide. And this is just one more output from that project. If these are just some quotes from Detroit residents that came to these meetings. Actually, some had some experience talking about and dealing with air quality, but a fair amount did not. And so it was really powerful to hear the comments that we received from residents on this, and that has all been incorporated into defining the policy agenda and the work that we're going to be doing going forward on air quality. So I really wanted to conclude on this just to really emphasize that the work we're doing has really been on PFAS and on many of these projects has really been driven by a deep engagement with the community, having them help define the direction of both the research work, but also the policy connected work that goes along with that. So I think we have a lot of questions, and I think this is the last slide. Next slide. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I think we have some questions, and we can spend some time in dialogue with each other.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for the amazing presentation, and the people who are still with us. Thank you so much. We have a few questions. We will try to cover all of them. Jeff, I wanted to ask you, the report that you mentioned about air quality, the collaboration is on our website, just in case if people want to look at it. I mean, we can share the link with them. I just wanted to double check if it's on our website. Or
we just released it in the last week, so
okay.
it's in progress. So
okay.
it will be there.
All right, so we're gonna share it with you, everyone, and then when it's when you can access it. All right, one of the questions we got is what follow-on work is being done at the hotspot locations? And I think that question was related to the fish study.
Well, I mean, I will comment briefly. For those of us that are in the Huron River area, I think we're all familiar with the tri-bar impact on our watershed and the river. That's an example of some of the source investigations and actions that the state of Michigan has taken as they've identified sources that are impacting these watersheds and drinking water. And the unfortunate thing is we're addressing them after we discover them. So the impact is already there, the fish advisory is already there, and we're trying to clean up the mess afterwards. And so we're really trying to get ahead of that. But I will say that the state is investigating areas of concern as they are identified and working to take actions to address that. I will say we are pretty frustrated with the tri-bar situation and the failure of the state to actually take enforcement action against them, both related to PFAS, and we also had a hexchrome spill into the wastewater treatment plant and partially into the river last year, and we still have no enforcement action from the state agencies. So we do think we need more to remain vigilant with the state in terms of having them be responsive.
All right, thank you, Jeff. I think Erica, maybe you can answer this question. What does it mean to homogenize the fish?
Oh, I had to learn that too. I was new to that. Basically it means to grind them up and kind of composite them together. Is that right, Jeff? That's about the extent of my knowledge. Jeff has a much deeper understanding of how things get homogenized.
Yeah, when we're doing a fish sample or a variety of sample, even with soils, you have samples where they're not uniform. So homogenization is a process to make the sample uniform so that you can get a representative sample from whatever it is you're testing that would represent the whole. Because obviously, even if with soil, think if you were sampling soil, there's a lot of different bits and pieces in there. So depending on what part of it you sample, you may get a different result. So when we do soil work, we homogenize it to make it uniform so that we can get a representative sample from it.
Thank you, Jeff and Erica. And another question, I think that's important and something I think we're working on. How about recommending the complete termination of PFAS manufacturing?
Yeah, I think there's, as folks know, watching the news around PFAS, there's a lot of attention on it now. And I think the focus has really been to do that. We want to, and important is PFAS is thousands of chemicals. So some of these chemicals have been phased out, but we've shifted to other ones. We've shifted from what's called long chain to shorter chain PFAS, and we're seeing the same types of environmental health impacts from those. So I think that's the ultimate solution. PFAS uses are everywhere still. There's both polymeric, which are plastic PFAS, as well as non-polymeric, which are the ones that people are most familiar with. So, but our cars, our planes, our homes, it's in products throughout our economy. So putting the genie back in the bottle once we've let it out is a difficult task. I think we're all engaged in doing that to try to stop all of these uses, but many of these uses either we're not studied adequately, or we're allowed to happen with no study, and now we're having to backtrack and try to stop these uses.
All right.
Yeah, before we move off of that, I think one of the things that was impressed upon the anglers as we went through the training process is that PFAS is a constituent in, both fire retardant and water repellent clothing. And so you literally are wearing it. And just such a hard issue to get away from when it's that prevalent in our society.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, Bill. And that was one of the things we tried to do with that training, is say, okay, here's all the ways that you could try to avoid PFAS when you're out collecting fish. Do the best that you can, basically, because yeah, like you said, it is everywhere.
And I think Erica Bloom, that's like those recommendations are all available in the report for people to look at when they catch fish and see how they can avoid it as much as possible, right?
If they go to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, there's a brochure that kind of walks people through how to collect and how to process fish, and give some guidance a little bit more on just collect. Yeah.
There is a question, how would an angler know whether or not the fish are safe in locations that they might not want to use outside of the Huron River and Rouge River watersheds?
The state of Michigan provides us Eat Safe Fish guide that summarizes their recommendations for fish consumption in pretty much most of the bodies of water in the state, whether it's the Great Lakes or the inland lakes. So that's kind of the go-to source. And the advantage of that, as well as there's concern about other things in fish, particularly methyl mercury, PCBs, and that guide gives guidance for other chemical contaminants that are in fish.
Okay. And there is another question, I think that's for the soil study that we're working on. How harmful is the soil contamination if you grow vegetables like carrots, potatoes, beets that grow in the ground?
One of the one of the other unfortunate aspects of this is things like compost and that are dependent on has been found to be contaminated with PFAS, and some of that's from the fact that we've had PFAS on some single-use food containers that have ended up in compost, and that's caused contamination. So I'm not directly answering the question other than say that these are questions we're really starting to try to study and understand the impact on vegetables. We know some vegetables it is transferred to. We know it can have an impact on farm animals and beef. I think we've worked a lot with a local farmer in Michigan who's had his entire herd of cattle confiscated because he applied sewage sludge from Wixom on his farm field, and then the cows grazed on it and it contaminated the cows. So we know there's an impact there. I would say the science around the vegetables and produce is at a bit of an earlier stage.
Okay. I see, Erica, that you answered that question, but I think maybe it's good for everyone to hear it. Have you had any conversations with people working on the PFAS issues in Oscoda?
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment on that. That's definitely been part of this bigger network that we've helped form with impacted community members called the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. A few of those folks are from Oscoda and have been doing this work for a long time. Those that don't know, Oscoda has been contaminated from the Wurtsmith Air Force Base from firefighting foam for decades, and there's ongoing work with the Department of Defense there. But for the fish project, we actually did connect with a few of the anglers that were in Oscoda that helped us collect fish from a place called Clark's Marsh, which is a do not eat the fish consumption advisory there. It's one of the more highly contaminated watersheds, probably. I know in the country, I've been saying the world, and that might be a big jump, but I think it's really contaminated. And they helped us collect fish to kind of just go through our method of collection, processing, sending to the lab, and no surprise, we found really high levels in the fish. But it was a really good partnership, and we continue to work with them on a number of different projects.
Yeah, I know also we worked with them on the PFAS and water, right? Not just the fish. And then the next question about the fish study, did you differentiate the PFAS level between the whole fish and the fillets that are more likely to be eaten?
As I mentioned earlier, we have a set of work we're doing, working with Indiana University, looking at organs and fillets, and that's asking some particular science questions related to that. So we're hoping to have that published in a peer review journal. In terms of whole fish to fillets, there's it's usually the whole fish are 2 to 3 times higher than the fillet concentrations when you look at the literature of people who've studied this. So as a general rule of thumb, that's if you do see a whole fish result, you can use that to calculate what the fillet result would be.
And what's the most efficient method to remove PFAS compounds in drinking water? Is well water ever a problem, but just surface water?
The best method, I assume from a consumer point of view, you're asking, is reverse osmosis. It happens to be the most expensive method as well. There are, like the Ann Arbor Water Treatment Plant is using some pretty advanced activated carbon filtration or treatment for the city's water supply. Many of the home filters have pretty mixed results. The carbon-based filters, some of them work pretty well initially for some PFAS, but you can tend to get some blow by of the filter over time. So yeah, those are your options.
Okay. I'm looking through the questions just to see, we still have more. Okay, let's see. I'm sorry, guys.
I'll respond to
Yeah.
one while you're,
Yeah, go ahead.
someone asked about fish, birds and turtles.
Yeah.
And I think, there's been quite a few studies that have come out regarding impacts on particularly waterfowl, water birds, ducks, and birds of prey, and looking at impacts on reproduction. And so I definitely think we're seeing those impacts on that level. I think we're likely to see significant impacts to invertebrates as well. I know our partners are at Wayne State University, kind of in parallel with this. We're doing a study collecting invertebrates, so invertebrates, bugs, and that kind of thing, from some of the watersheds as well. So yes, there are impacts there, and I think they're likely to be significant.
All right, we're gonna take two more questions. Are the PFAS always in the product, or are they through the use of PFAS, or are they there through the use of PFAS in the machinery that manufactures the product, as lubricants, for example?
Yes, it is both. And I'll give one quick example. The other, one of the areas we're working with community groups actually around the country is synthetic artificial turf used for sports fields. And we believe the PFAS that is used in the synthetic turf grass fibers is both as a processing agent. So it helps you actually produce those long, thin fibers that turn into the carpet. But we're also seeing some other PFAS there, but it's an important point. There is a manufacturing use of it. Many of those are fluoropolymers that are used as release agents during different industrial processes. Those tend to go along for the ride as well. And then there are intentional non-fluoropolymer uses as well.
Last question we're going to take. Are there any problems with normal cooking on Teflon, coated pans, or only if Teflon is heated to very high temperature?
Definitely when it's heated to a high temperature. Consumer Reports, we did a study on Teflon pans a couple of years ago. Consumer Reports followed up and did some testing last year that indicated the presence and release of PFAS from the Teflon at lower temperatures than what had typically been reported. So that's a new, and we can try to find and post that as well. And then I'll just highlight again that the concern about PFAS is not just the product, it's the life cycle. These PFAS are made in North Carolina, they're made in Southeast Asia, these compounds, and there's massive contamination around the plants that produce these PFAS compounds. Their rivers and air are highly contaminated. So that even when the consumer exposure part of it is not well studied and understood, we think that the life cycle of PFAS for almost all these applications demands that we should put the clamp down and stop producing this stuff, because we can see there's a fluorochemical part in China that's so contaminated from the production of PFAS, it's incredible. And we have sites in the US that are just the same.
Yeah, I think this one question, maybe because we didn't answer anything related to it. What are the implications of PFAS levels for floating in the Huron River through Ann Arbor? And another question related to that, like wading in the water, if that was okay or not. Because advisory is on the fish, eating fish. What about other activities on the river?
Yeah, well, the state of Michigan says that the river is safe for contact at the current levels that are in the river. So that's the official guidance from the state of Michigan. I think we're particularly concerned with sites where we have known hot spots where there's elevated concentrations and issues around foam. This foam in particular, having pets avoid it and avoiding areas where that's going to concentrate. So I think that's our guidance on that.
All right, I think we covered lots of the questions. I just want to mention that if you feel inspired today by our presenters, all the things that we shared with you today, the work that we do at the Ecology Center, you can make a donation online if you would like to support this work and the other work that we do. You can do it online through our website. My colleague is gonna share the link in the chat. It's really very easy. You can even, if you want to make sure that you protect the environment and public health year round, you can make a monthly donation. $10 donation or $20 monthly donation can make a huge difference. And you can set up the monthly donation really in less than 5 minutes if you want to do it online. So I just want to, mention that, and I want to thank you everyone for attending our event. And I want to thank you, Erica, Belle, and Jeff for the amazing presentation. I always talk to you about this work and I still learn so much more. I hope everyone here enjoyed it and also learned so much. And if you still have more questions that you would like to, ask us, feel free to contact us. And also, I want to remind you the recording, we're going to send it tomorrow. It's going to be available tomorrow. And if you want to watch other events that we did just like that on other topics that we study and work on, you can also go to our website, ecocenter.org. And then my colleague also is going to share the link there. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending and your generous support. And we hope that we also see you again next time we do such events. Have a wonderful evening.